everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Risk Management Primer, How to Protect Your Attendees and Organization from Disaster, presented by Meetings Today. My name is Tyler Davidson. I'm the Vice President and Chief Content Director with Meetings Today, and I'm excited to welcome you to this webinar, one of the many that we offer. Our webinars cover a variety of topics that are all important to the meetings industry, so we hope you'll join us for them all. And then we also offer a number of newsletters in addition to our monthly magazine. So be sure to check us out on the web at meetingstoday.com. We'd like to begin today with a brief polling question. A pop-up should appear in your screen momentarily. It will read, please enter the number of people watching this event with you, and please make sure to include yourself. To answer the question, simply select your response and then click submit. And we'll give you a couple seconds to do that. Thank you. Today's webinar is worth 1 clock hour of credit in the risk management domain toward the CMP application through the Events Industry Council. To receive credit for attending this webinar, you must be present for the full hour. On completion of the webinar, you'll be taken to the related Meetings Today Webinar Club page to obtain your credit. And we encourage you to ask questions during the presentation. You may submit a question at any time by typing your question in the designated Q&A area, and then by hitting send. Should you experience any technical difficulties, please send a message in the 8878. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors. So thank you today to the Explore Asheville CVB, Meet Atlantic City, and Newport Hotel Collection. Let's quickly review our learning objectives for today's course. During the webinar, you will learn the following: how to assess your company's current state of risk management preparedness and gain senior management buy-in, how to design a risk management assessment tool for any size, complexity, or type of event, how to involve the hotel, event suppliers, and first responders in pre-event safety planning and rehearsals, how to use the emergency procedures from your event responder network and draft your on-site crisis response plan for your team to know what to do in the first 10 minutes of any crisis, how to plan for alternative crisis outcomes, and how to create an event crisis communication plan, including social media channels, an empowered communication hub, and key documentation for the post-crisis debrief. Now, I would like to introduce today's speaker, Brenda Rivers. And, just as a background, I know all of you out there, myself included, are really, suffering through this coronavirus crisis right now. And, I just have to preface this by saying Brenda is really the utmost, I think, expert on crisis management such as this. So I'll just say that and introduce her now officially with the bio. Brenda is the president and CEO of Undable Meetings, Incentives, Events, and Consulting, and her new risk management focused company, SAFE. She is a risk management expert who frequently speaks at major meetings industry events and also works with corporations, universities, and other organizations that believe the security of their attendees and employees is a paramount concern. Also, Brenda wrote the definitive book on meetings and events risk management, the Meeting and Event Risk Management Guide, how to develop a customized risk management playbook. And just trust me on this, this is the resource book for meetings risk management. And you head on over to our bookstore at books.meetingstoday.com. When you check out, if for participating in the webinar today, if you enter the code SAVE20, you'll get $20 off the book. And with that, I would like to extend a warm welcome and hand things over to today's speaker. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you so much, Tyler.
Thanks a bunch. Wow, and I was just have to say before we jump into this, I know we had this on our webinar calendar for a while, but so much has changed in the industry just in the last month that I know you're seeing it, right, Brenda?
I definitely am. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this session today, especially with what you have to deal with in your personal and professional lives. And thank you to Meetings Today for inviting me to speak. I'm talking to you today from my perspective as the founder, owner, and former CEO of Andavo Meetings and Incentives for over the past 25 years. The last 8 years, I became very passionate about risk management. When a large conference that we were managing in Baltimore was struck by Hurricane Sandy, and we, of course, had no contingency plans, no advanced crisis response plans. After that, I was driven and passionate to do research on the duty of care that planners and organizers have to keep their attendees safe. And that led to my developing a 6-step approach to risk management specifically for the meeting industry. And although this is a somber time, I am really glad and excited to be able to share with you the principles of this approach. But I want to say that this is really as much about the human side of what we are all going through. We have huge challenges and we're in uncharted waters. This is about looking forward to an uncertain future, and it's your future as much as the future of our events, our clients, organizations, and our global society. I do not have all the answers. I don't even have all the right answers. But I hope that after our hour together today that you can take away a different way of looking at how you're developing your risk management strategy. It's a different approach and a process that I would like for you to be able to follow after this session, and you can apply to your individual challenges. In all honesty, I really feel that I have a duty, a personal duty, to share with you what I've learned and developed in the past 8 years, if it can make a difference to our industry. So what I'm going to talk about is what I believe, what I think, and what I feel based on my personal and professional experiences, my passion for safety and preparedness, my love of our industry and our people. As Tyler said, my team and I have been through many crises with our clients over the last 25 years, including Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Matthew, a homicide, bomb threats, and Zika we thought was horrible because we had to move a client from Curacao to California with only 6 weeks. But nothing has prepared us for how to deal with a pandemic of this magnitude. Now, several months ago, I was planning this presentation, and it was to focus on how to develop your event risk management strategy. And frankly, Tyler, it did include all of those outcomes that you've just shared with the group. But
yeah, and I guess I have to say, even in a description that you turned in some time ago, it did highlight a pandemic. So
exactly.
I was going to go in and really update this and the other team members here, and we really didn't have to update it a whole bunch because it was already in there. So thanks for that.
Right. And so as you can see by the title, I've gone from the general risk management strategy, which we're definitely talking about, to include the threat, how to deal with the threat of COVID-19. And now it's really no longer a threat, but it's a reality. And so the focus today is how do we create that event crisis management for a pandemic, and specifically what we're living in. We are in the middle of a real, undisputed pandemic crisis. And so the first thing we need to do today and going forward is we need to look at what lessons are we learning? What have we learned so far in the past couple of months? What are we learning now? And I'm going to focus on 2 primary lessons that I hope you will take away with. One is how to create a pandemic crisis plan when you're in the middle of a crisis. In the practice of risk management, there are always opportunities that come from lessons learned. And I think all of you will agree with me that any type of risk that you go through in your life holds opportunities for you. There is no off-the-shelf plan for how to create this crisis management plan. And you're learning that how hard it is, how difficult it is to create your crisis plan when everything's going on around you. But the bottom line is we all have to do this. We have to create a crisis response plan for this pandemic, and we're creating it out of trial and error, on our feet, out of fear and panic, and we don't have the luxury of a thoughtful strategy. We don't have the luxury and advantage of time. Time is compressed. The second lesson that I hope we will take away with today and for you to learn from is this is really an opportunity for you to go back, and after this is all over and we've come out on the other side, to develop your true risk management strategy for all of your events and for your organization. So today we will be using this pandemic, this horrific pandemic, as our case study. When you are in the middle of a crisis and you're experiencing it, you will learn what the 4 duty of care standards really mean and why. So when I'm showing you this approach, it's not just going to be another kind of process that doesn't really resonate with you. You're going to be learning it as you're going through these times. We all know what it means to have muscle memory. We all know that when we're doing crisis management, the most effective part of crisis management training is to actually do crisis simulations. And guess what? We're not doing simulations. So you're going to have muscle memory that will help you build the 6 elements that go into your risk management playbook. So the first thing that we do in a risk management strategy is you have to know your current state. You have to know the current state of your organization. You have to know your roles and responsibilities. You have to know if your team is ready. And today, I think that we understand that our current state is made up of fear, vulnerability, potential job loss, compressed time. We're overwhelmed. We have uncertainty. We have panic, potential liability. Our organizations are going through financial loss, disruption, and crisis. It's really beyond our wildest imaginations. And so what we need to do is we need to be able to know, how do we get to the current state where we can stay calm and carry on? And I really like to focus on one of my heroes, which I know you all know this phrase. It's called Keep Calm and Carry On by Winston Churchill. And when I feel like I can't focus because I'm so stressed and I have so much anxiety, I think about that phrase and I think about Winston Churchill and when he used this to rally the British people, and it was 1939, and he was telling the British people that bombs were going to start falling on England. And I think about how horrible that must have been. In some ways, it feels like we're waiting for bombs to be dropped on us. And so I go to my place where I say, this is not nearly as bad as that. And I'm going to figure out what I need to do for myself to stay calm and carry on. On March 11th, I gave a presentation to the MIC Meeting Industry Council in Colorado, and I asked my audience of over 100 people to raise their hands if they had included the threat of a pandemic in their current event risk management plan. And I'm sure there's no surprise to you, no one raised their hands, not one person. And I would imagine if I asked you to send in a poll, you would have the same response. You did not include the threat of a pandemic in any of your event crisis management plans. And most people didn't really even have a risk management strategy. So I would say that it's fair to say we don't need to go through a current state exercise here today, because we know that our current state, again, is one of uncertainty, one of total uncertainty. And we need to find out, how can we get to that place where we're calm and we're carrying on? So, Tyler, I changed our agenda for today so that we can actually make this the most effective way to spend our time. So we're going to do three things. We're going to identify the lessons we are learning, which we have just focused on, and how we can turn them into opportunities in our professional and personal life. I hope that you will understand the principles of an event risk management strategy, and we're going to review what are the critical elements of a crisis response plan that you can take back and create that plan for your organization.
And I would also like to add, we really want to encourage people to ask questions. We have the chat area open, the Q&A area, and I know typically the greatest number of people we have in our webinars are meeting planners, but if there's any facilities people out there too, we're all in this together, and we want to hear your questions too. And I know Brenda really, that's part of her expertise also.
Yes, that's right. And I will clarify this by saying that the principles of my approach, which I call the SAFE approach, really apply to the entire hospitality industry. And so feel free to join me after this on my blog. I'm going to be sending you my SAFE blog, and you can continue any questions that we haven't covered today, because we do have a short time compared to what I usually take. I have just a few things I want to make very clear in the beginning, and that is that this is usually a 4.5-hour class that I teach when I train meeting planners. So we're condensing it down into less than an hour. So I'm hoping that this is going to be very clear and focused for you. But I don't have all the answers. I'm not giving you legal advice. And first and foremost, before you implement any of the approaches and processes with respect to your meetings and events, you must always put family and self first. You have to take care of your family and yourself before you should focus on the risk management strategy and the crisis response plan for your company. So, in creating a crisis response plan, what we're really doing is managing through uncertainty. Oops, I'm so sorry, some of my slides are they seem to be out of order here. We seem to be missing a slide. So I want to just talk you through what the duty of care principles are. The duty of care principles for the SAFE approach include the duty of care approach that I've developed for event organizers and planners include an application for the whole industry. There are 4 duty of care legal standards that are the basis of the actions you must take, and we document them in the form of a playbook. This approach is flexible, and it needs to be customized and for your organization and your event. You can scale these up or down, but you always use these for your guide. So I'm going to explain these just briefly in the context of our current pandemic crisis. The first duty of care is the duty for you to research. So when you go back and you create the crisis response plan for your events, the first duty you have is to research the vulnerability of your event. Now, I understand that most people are trying to decide, do we cancel our event entirely? Do we move our event to a different date or a different location? Or do we continue to hold our event at lower attendance? So there are many things that you need to research, but you start with researching your attendees. What are the demographics of your participants? How vulnerable are your participants if you continue with your event? Their age, their health, how many ADAs do you have? Have they done recent travel? What is the profile of your attendees and your other vendors? The location of your event. It goes without saying that you need to research what's the current state of the coronavirus or the COVID-19 virus in the location of your event. The next piece that you research is you research, obviously, your hotel, your venues, all of the other partners that you're working with to put your event together. You research their current state and their ability to carry on with this event in terms of their own financial status and their own ability to deliver. You research any insurance that you have, any insurance that you might be able to obtain, which is pretty much not possible right now for the current COVID-19. And you research all of the current issues with the travel going to and from your event. This includes all of your contract terms, and you research the financial implications. So these are all important for the meeting planner to gather together and present and develop a vulnerability assessment, which I call implementing a risk matrix. The second duty of care after you've done all of your research is the duty to inform. So who do you inform? Obviously, you need to be informing your planning team as you go along. You will be involving all of your planning team and hopefully many of your stakeholders in creating this vulnerability risk matrix. Then you take the outcomes of your research and you present the risk assessment, the financial, legal, and reputational impact on your key decision makers. And you move into discussing the alternatives. You clearly are going to need to inform your attendees if you haven't already been engaging in a communication and messaging strategy, and informing your contracted vendors. The third duty of care is the duty to recommend. This is the point where you become very strategic with your client and your decision makers in your organization. You will be developing your alternatives. The three alternatives that I think most of you are involved in is, do we cancel? Do we reduce attendance and continue on? Do we move it to a different date or a different location? Do we offer refunds, partial refunds? Do we use virtual options? These are all of the alternatives that I would imagine each and every one of you is going through right now. And you need to be able to create a comparative analysis for your decision makers so they have all of the facts, all of the worst case scenarios to deal with so that they can make the appropriate decision. And I want to emphasize to you that in my experience with Hurricane Sandy, which was quite frankly not as horrific as this, but it certainly created all of my muscle memory and the path to which I have developed this risk management strategic approach, is that your decision makers will look to you. They look to us. They look to the planners, the meeting and event professionals. And they turned to me in a board meet with the board. I had a board meeting with my executive team for my client. And after having met with the mayor's office of Baltimore and the hotels and the catering department and discussing all of the pros and cons of canceling the event when we knew Hurricane Sandy was coming and was going to hit us, they looked to me and asked me what to do. And that was really my defining moment. That was when I suddenly realized that I needed to, after this was over, go back and do all that I could do to figure out what is a duty of care that meeting planners and organizers really have to our events to keep our attendees as safe and secure as possible. And you can't, what you can do as a planner and what your duty is to do as a planner is to do all the research and create all of the possible alternatives and the negatives and the positives so that you're giving them the full information that they need to make the right decision, but it's not your decision as the meeting planner. The last duty of care is to plan. And I will say, it's your job, once you've gathered all this information and you've started putting it into your risk management playbook and you've documented it, which you must do, the planning part is the last but the biggest part. This is where we are today. We are at the stage where, yes, we have to go back and we have to do research and we have to update our decision makers on the status and our current vulnerabilities and the pros and the cons of our options. We have to research what the worst case scenario is. We have to bring in our legal team, the legal advice. We have to bring in the financial people so that they know what's at stake. But when we start to plan, and if we had been planning a month ago for dealing with the threat of COVID-19, we would be identifying our resources and responders. And our crisis response plan would have looked more like, well, if we go on with our event and some group of people arrive at our event and they either appear sick or they are sick, or the worst case is, what if we had an outbreak of the virus in our event? That really would have been what we were planning for. And as such, we would have engaged with our hotel safety and security team and found out what viral infection control policy they had. We would have involved the medical responders in the community where the event was going on so that our team would be completely ready and know what to do if we had an outbreak in the middle of our event. We're not there right now. We've gone beyond that. So really, we've gone beyond the point of knowing all the extra sanitation and hygiene that we have to do in a large conference, such as the MIC conference where I spoke last month at the beginning of the month. The hand sanitizer stations and washing and wiping everything down and really getting ready if the virus hit our event. We would have already developed a crisis communication strategy where we would be messaging our attendees before the event on FAQs, how to stay healthy, how to know before you go, we would be advising them early and often. And we would have an on-site communication team ready with a message from the CEO on our safety policy statement and our pre-planning for social media communication with everyone. And we would have rehearsed all of this, but we're not there. We're in the middle of the crisis response plan. So we are going to be creating a crisis response plan for each and every one of our organizations when we go back to our home offices. And I want to talk now about what are the critical actions for this crisis response plan. What are the things that you should be doing? These actions actually would be fitting into the fourth element in your playbook. And I'm sorry that there is a slide missing that shows the playbook, the 6 elements of the playbook, as well as the 4 duty of care standards. But I will be able to go over that with you verbally and send that out to you so that you have it, because it was a critical slide. And I actually redid this whole presentation very quickly because of the current state that we're in. And so I hope that it makes as much of an impact on you by me talking you through it, and we'll have more time for questions. So the first critical action for your crisis response plan that needs to be in some type of a written document, however you create your strategic plan for any piece of your strategic meetings management process. Use whatever type of Excel spreadsheet or comparative analysis chart, but you have to chart this in a way that it makes sense to you and you can present it to your decision makers. We need to make a crisis response plan. We are in the middle of a crisis. We are in the middle of a pandemic. We don't know what's coming. We know we're on lockdown. We have these events planned for March, April, May, up to June. And so what are our options right now? And the first thing you need to do is you need to say, do we have the right people in the right place for a crisis response plan? The crisis right now is what is going to happen to our entire society, but what can you control? You can control what is going to happen to your events, what should happen to your events, and you can control how you fulfill the 4 standards of duty of care as a planner to advise and assist your decision makers with a decision. Do you have the right people in the right place? You need to pull together your leadership team. Members from leadership, do you have the right leadership involved? Your events team, your financial stakeholders, your communications team, your legal team, human resources, and your travel team. You will be gaining information from them that's vital to know what to do when you have to cancel this event. Identify a decision tree so that you know who can you go to identify the tipping point. What is the tipping point going to be when your decision maker says, okay, we were planning to carry on with this event. We thought we could carry on with it in June with reduced attendance. We've offered virtual technology options. We've offered refunds to the people that need refunds. But who's going to make the decision, and what's the decision point? What is that tipping point? Is it a number of attendees so that if you go so low, you can't achieve the business purpose for the event? You can't achieve a true return on investment. Your decision makers cannot achieve their ultimate business purpose if you carry on with less than 50%, less than 70%. You need to know all this up front. You need to know all this now. And your role, again, the role that you have in creating this crisis action plan is the role that you always have as a trusted advisor. You are to be researching, informing, recommending, planning, and recording everything that you're doing as part of your event project management strategy. You need to identify, is your crisis communications team for dealing with changing the event? Is it the crisis communication team from your corporate crisis team, or is it the crisis communication team from the meeting planning team? You should already be engaged in a messaging strategy, and I'm sure you are, to your attendees for these events that are scheduled to happen in the next 3 to 9 months. You should already be using your familiar social media channels. You should already have the right people in the right places to be communicating out to your internal and external stakeholders. And you should know what to do and how to contact the people as things change and develop and as a decision is made. The second critical action in developing the crisis response plan is really the heart of the matter. You need to develop contingency plans for the pandemic. And in order to do that, you should create a comparative analysis. Again, what are our options in dealing with this event, the outcome of this event, and what are our compelling factors to make that decision? Option 1, and you all may have different options, but the most typical and reasonable options are cancel the entire event, hold it at a reduced attendance, rebook at a different time or location. again, this really gets to the heart of what you're going to be doing if you go back, and you will create this comparative analysis. So for each one of the options that you think will be viable for your organization to be able to have some type of an ROI or reproduce this event at a later time, is you first talk about your people. Safety and the well-being of your people are your first priority. So you will look at their vulnerabilities, as I talked about earlier, for each one of these options. The safety and well-being would be how you base your decisions, how your decision maker base the decision. What is the business purpose of this event? That's the second priority. How do you achieve the ROI and the ROE? Your attendees are looking for the outcome. Your attendees are depending on a lot of these meetings for their training, for their connection, for driving the business forward. So how else can you achieve the business purpose? The degree to which these cannot be achieved without a face-to-face meeting will drive how much risk your company is willing to take. And the next piece is a piece that once you've decided, well, we can meet the safety and well-being of our people if we continue this event. We can also meet the business purpose. That's our second priority. We can have a return on the attendee experience through this type of event, whether it's in-face combined with virtual. We must go forward with this. Then you have to start working with the contracts. And force majeure is like it's the first, I don't want to say stumbling block, but it's the first critical factor in the cost decision, the financial decision. And I'm not going to go into all the different force majeure language, because we all know that at best force majeure has been murky and poorly understood and really not paid much attention to in our industry, because we haven't had to. And now I know that those planners that are out there have been facing the standard answers from hotels when you've called hotels to say, can we cancel under force majeure? And the hotels are in just as bad a position as we are. Obviously, we're all in this together. And I believe that now we are truly in a force majeure situation. And most hotels are allowing cancellations with full refunds or part refunds. There's negotiation going on. I listened yesterday to Michael Dominguez in his presentation in the ALHI recap of our current state. Where are we now? And he indicated that ALHI had rebooked over $20 million in hotel contracts for later times this year, and that he believed that most hotels that are not in the major cities like New York and San Francisco and Washington are allowing force majeure up to June. And if the virus takes its downturn and we go in the best direction that we would hope for in this next 2-month period, hotels will be enforcing their contracts after June. This is not my opinion, but it is one thing you have to prepare for. So if you have a program in June and the hotels are saying, we don't consider force majeure to be in effect as of June and after, we're holding these contracts as valid under force majeure, you still need to make a plan to have to cancel, because, of course, the virus could not be abating by June. And so you need to go through the entire planning process and determine what are all of the factors that go into canceling this event. What is it going to look like? So you need to start negotiating now with hotels. Have them come to the table with you and give you their opinion on whether or not they're going to allow you to invoke force majeure in June, July, August, and the fall. If they are not, then you need to tell them, this is your position. Consult your legal department, your legal advice. Take a look at renegotiating if you rebook, that would look like. This is a time where I think hotels and vendors, or again, we have to respect and empathize with them and try to protect them and their livelihood as much as ours. But this is a time when you need to go ahead and have a dialogue about these different options.
And Brenda, speaking of which, do you want to wait till the end? There's some good questions coming in, or should I throw some out now? Either way is fine with me.
No, I'm fine. You can go ahead. I only have like 2 more slides.
Okay, we'll wait till you're done then.
Okay. I think I've just discussed legal is very important for every single contract you have, starting with the hotel, starting with the highest cost, starting with the vendors, obviously where your biggest financial exposure is. Unfortunately, a lot of folks I talk to, they don't even have a force majeure clause in most of their vendor contracts. So you really would be looking at the statutory force majeure provisions, depending on what state you're in, depending on what country you're in. What are the countries, especially Italy, Britain, countries, European countries, they have their own law that is used to interpret the contracts. But this is a huge part of what you need to be doing in your duty to research. Get people to come to the table to you, and go through the legal ramifications of each and every one of your force majeure clauses. And again, I think people will come to the table. If the event's going to go on at half attendance, then this is a time when you want to negotiate with everyone to say to the vendors, we want you to have some revenue from this event, so we're all in this together, so let's talk about how we all take a hit. This is exactly what we did in Sandy. We all took a hit. Everybody took a hit. And yet it went forward, and it actually turned out to be one of the best events this organization had ever had at half the attendance. It goes without saying you should be talking to your internal stakeholders about the reputation damage that could occur if you don't handle this properly. This is a separate, it's really a separate training with professionals who handle protection of your organization's brand. But there is a huge cost to your reputation. The opportunity is there's a huge upside to the reputation and your brand when you do approach this in the right way, and you have a risk management strategy, and you communicate that strategy, and you show everyone you're doing everything that you possibly can do to prepare. And the insurance is also a longer discussion, but again, everyone knows that if you have event cancellation insurance, it doesn't include COVID-19 unless you took it out before there was any inkling of this pandemic. There are going to be more products, I think, available as the insurance industry regroups. So I would have a close relationship now with your insurance provider and start looking at some of the other insurance companies that are out there. And understand, if you have it, what's your claims process? We went through the claims for Sandy, and if we hadn't followed certain mitigation processes in the continuing of this event, then they would not have been able to collect their insurance proceeds, which covered most of their losses. We talked already about the tipping point. The key decision maker needs to be involved. Once you've given them the total benefit of all of your research and recommendations, then you have to put the decision squarely and the timing in the lap of your decision makers. So in conclusion, how do we stay calm and carry on? Put your family and self first. There's so many opportunities that you can do online. I'm just amazed at the classes. You can take risk management classes. You can take webinars. You can take self-care and education. If you focus on being a trusted advisor to your client and your organization, you have a purpose, you have a direction. You're not out there swimming in a sea of panic and anxiety alone. Go back and do the hard work of creating this response plan for being in this pandemic. And then last but not least, my biggest opportunity is start, after this is over, do the building blocks for your risk management playbook that will apply to all of your events and your organization. And I'd like to end with something that gives me calm. It's a quote I just read by Paul Vandervetter, the CEO and president of MPI. Our event industry will help drive the economic recovery. We will come out of this. We all know this, because when we meet, we change the world.
Well, thank you, Brenda. That was a very amazing presentation. This in a little in stages, just for a while, and I really appreciate all the adjustments you made. So thanks, Brenda.
You're welcome.
And we'll go to Q&A now. I guess we'll start with the $1 million question that I'm hearing everywhere, and I always, maybe I'll just sort of paraphrase what all the industry attorneys say to any question is, it depends, right? So here's
Yes.
the question. It's about insurance, event cancellation insurance for COVID, for pandemics. I've reached out to a lot of people, and they say, oh, this mystical beast does exist out there, but there are a lot of stipulations. What do you know about event cancellation insurance that involves a pandemic?
Well, what I know about the events cancellation policies that I've worked with in the past is that, generally speaking, pandemic and most communicable diseases were not included. You had to purchase a special rider to include something like a global pandemic or even a communicable disease that strikes your particular location if you're in the tropics or whatever. So I mean, my experience is really just based upon what I've had with my clients. I always recommend it, and most clients have felt that it's too expensive and they didn't need it. And the clients that have really taken out the insurance are those that have an event that is a primary fundraiser. So it's a lot of nonprofits and corporations, but those that have sponsors that help raise funds for their organization, and they do not cover their registration. It's not like an incentive where the company pays for everything. And so they have a lot at stake when they have to give back registration fees, and they don't earn the sponsorship dollars. So it can be in the millions of dollars. And so the cost benefit of that kind of insurance was a valid one. But I can also tell you from experience, the first claim, it's just like anything else. The first claim you file, as in Sandy, then the next time you take that out, which, believe you me, the organization would always have it after they've experienced being able to recover from it through the insurance, your premiums double. And that's not because, they more than double sometimes, but it's based upon how much revenue you stand to gain by holding the event. For the other types of events where the organization is paying for everything, the organization pays for the attendees to go to the event, they pay for their air, they pay for every expense. I have not really seen a lot of organizations take that out. And I think one of my recommendations for companies after we get out of this is to take a look at what it means to self-insure for things that definitely won't be covered, or if they are covered, the cost is going to be so high to pay it every year, you may as well self-insure. And my advice is, I'm seeing now other insurance companies that I didn't even know exist that are that are talking about how they would cover new pandemics in new communicable diseases. And I have not yet seen a proposal for when we get out of this and someone's, an organization wants to start taking out insurance, what that cost is going to look like. But it's definitely something, again, just like the force majeure clause, that we hardly ever paid much attention to and hardly understood it. We now need to get, we planners need to understand the insurance piece, not that we can give the final advice, but we need to do our research and offer the options to the clients.
Great, thank you. And it is such a complicated issue. I'm sure the best advice would be to definitely consult with the attorneys that may be with your organization on any of this.
Exactly, and your own insurance, your insurance department, and your own, who is the insurance specialist in your company, and then who is your major professional liability carrier. They're,
Right.
They're already part of your team. That's where you should start.
Right, and then here's one really about communication. This person had a international conference in New York that they canceled, and the CEO wants to reschedule it in late August. The facility's working with them to get the space, but this person and their organizing committee are concerned that attendance will be low, speakers won't come, and that come August, companies might still prohibit or pay for travel. Should this person convey these concerns to senior management that going forward might not be the best or most prudent path?
That's an excellent question, and it plays right into my duty to research, duty to inform and recommend. You need to look at all of those as vulnerabilities. So this very beginning stage is assessing your vulnerabilities. So break this apart and analyze it down so you can create this risk matrix. If this, then what? So if we hold this event, what percentage of our attendees will definitely not come? And then you break it down and you even maybe do a survey to your attendees now and say, if we hold this in August and we offer virtual options, which I believe is we're seeing a huge resurgence in that, and it's a great idea. We're going to offer these options. So and here will be your cost to do this virtually. Start with the business purpose. What's the business purpose of the event? We agree we cannot, if we have low attendance, well, what does that mean? What is low attendance? How low can it go before it's not going to give us an ROI? You have to chart it, and you can't just throw all those ideas at your decision maker. You have to craft a very focused, vulnerability assessment. And if I have a sample vulnerability assessment, which you can model yours after, and you can say, here are all the factors we need to look at, and how do we rank? You can even rank it and say our vulnerability is ranked very high. And so if we can't have those, then at what point do we decide when we know that we're not going to get this attendance? You really have to go back in and build the timeline as a completely different timeline from a normal event. And again, you have a demarcation where this is the tipping point. We must have this number of attendees or we will need to cancel. And this is when you go back and negotiate and say, you negotiate the size of your deposits, you negotiate the amounts of your deposit. Everything is really going to be tentative. It's going to be based on certain conditions. But you have to know those conditions before you can negotiate with the hotel and the vendors. The same thing with the speakers. You have to have a force majeure clause that says you can get out if these conditions exist on this date, 2 months out, 3 months out, whatever you decide. If these conditions exist, then we will invoke our force majeure based on the COVID-19, and we get all our deposits back. I mean, hotels are going to have to be taking contracts like this, and because it is going to turn, and you will be able to continue with an event in August, but we don't know that yet. I mean, the country, as you all know, we haven't even hit our curve.
Yeah.
We're still gaining. So every 2 weeks, that's the other thing for you to create a chart, create a monitoring system. What are the primary things that you must monitor and track? And when we start to see these things happening with the state of the pandemic, what is that going to signal that we need to do with this event? And I mean, I hate to say it, but if you can't get the hotel and the vendors, the speakers, maybe the speakers would only agree, or maybe you put in their contract that if they choose to cancel under these circumstances, then they have to be willing to do their presentation virtually.
That's a good point. Yeah, covering all your bases and really planning for all contingencies, I think, is really good basic advice. And we really we're running up against the top of the hour, and Brenda was nice enough to include the contact information on that slide there. And always feel free to reach out to me too if you have any questions or you want to get through to her. So thanks, Brenda, for a great presentation.
Thank you so
I know
much.
I think we tried to, you say this is usually a 4-hour presentation. I think one time we convinced you to go down to 2 hours. So now we're down to an hour. It's just not enough. I promise not to make you do it in a half an hour next time.
Thank you. And, I'll make that one slide that somehow was missing available. So you can send it out, Tyler. It's the basic SAFE approach. It's the duty of care element of the duty of care standards, and then it's the 6 elements that go into your risk management strategic playbook. And actually it's the 4th element, which is the crisis response plan, which is what we focused on today, because we are in crisis.
Great. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
And I know all of you out there, hang in there. I know I haven't been out of my house in a week and a half, and I know a lot of you really have the same situation. So hang in there. We just actually I did a podcast with a relationship therapist on working from home and some of the stressors that go for that. So check that out. I think it's on our corporate site at staymates.com, and then so hopefully that'll give you some tips. And so we got to move on for today, though. So, and as we close out the presentation, there's a few important pieces of information we'd like to share. Join us on April 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern for 5 tips for your internal event strategy, presented by Julie Haddix and Rachel Andrews. Then again on April 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern, join us for What You Miss in Selecting and Inspecting Sites That Can Hurt You, presented by Joan Eisenstadt, our blogger who has been covering this whole coronavirus crisis very adeptly and adroitly, I must say. We hope you can join us for that. Also available on our website, you will find a vault of information on past webinars available for you to view at any time at your convenience. And as always, we'd like to thank today's sponsors. So thanks to the Explore Asheville Convention and Visitors Bureau, Eat Atlantic City, and Newport Hotel Collection. And then finally, upon completion of the webinar, you will be redirected to today's related Webinar Club page. Each webinar has its own unique Webinar Club page where you can download the presentation, view the webinar on demand, obtain your CMP credit certificate, and so much more. Today's Webinar Club page is located at meetingstoday.com/Webinar Club Risk Management. And if you're not automatically redirected, you may also visit our website at meetingstoday.com and just hover over the Webinars tab in the navigation area on the top and click on Webinar Club in the drop-down menu. So thanks again to Brenda and to all of you for joining us for this webinar today. Keep calm and carry on and have a great day, and we hope to see you again soon.